Welcome to a special Christmas week edition of the Steelers Breakdown podcast featuring PennLive Steelers beat reporter Nick Farabaugh, who's fresh from practice as the Steelers do a quick turnaround to play on Christmas Day. But right now, they're coming off of 6 days of disaster. That's the elapsed time between the flop in Philly and the beatdown in Baltimore. The Steelers defense got ran over to the tune of 200 plus total yards and about 7 yards per carry. And then there was Danger Russ, who was dangerous with the football to the tune of 2 egregious turnovers. That fumble heading toward the goal line that cost the Steelers 7 points in all probability. And then that pick six that put another 7 on the board for Baltimore on their way to doubling up the Steelers 34-17. We knew this gauntlet of games, which climaxes on Christmas Day with the Super Bowl champion Chiefs visiting Acrisure Stadium for the first ever game on Netflix. All eyes are on George Pickens to know if Santa will put a healthy hamstring in his stocking so that he can get back into the lineup for the Steelers versus the Chiefs. Let's go right to Nick, who saw Pickens in practice today and got the word straight from Pickens about how he is healing and how he is feeling. Nick, bring us up to date on Pickens and all the injuries as we head into this short week for Christmas.
Yeah, really encouraging Monday practice. This is the only true practice the Steelers are going to have this week. Tomorrow they will have a very, very abbreviated walkthrough, and they will not do much intensive work at all. So today was really the only time for guys like George Pickens to show that they were healthy enough. They'll have workouts probably off to the side to try and show that they can play. But in this one, George Pickens looks like he's going to go. I think he is. John, I do think that George Pickens is going to play in this one. Really good signs. There were 2 signs, first of all. He's back in individual drills. Last week, he was off to the side for the entire week, running, cutting. It seemed like he was ramping up to potentially try and play this week. On Monday, he was out there in individual drills for the first time since his hamstring injury. And more importantly than that, he was actually in team drills, which is important. That is the key thing. If you're limited, you're close, but maybe you're still a week away. He was not only limited in this one, he was actually out there going through walkthrough as if he was going to play. That's a really good sign for the Steelers. So I think George Pickens will play. Now, George Pickens said he feels good, but it's going to, be the training staff's decision. He'll have to wait and see with that. But, that is player speak, if you will. I think George Pickens is setting up quite well to play. I also think Deshaun Elliott's setting up well to play. I think Dante Jackson's setting up well to play. And I think Larry Ogunjobi is setting up well to play. So potentially 4 starters back for the Steelers in this one, which would be absolutely huge. 2 of the guys, I think Elliott and Pickens, make a significant difference in their games. So that's significant. I do not expect Joey Porter Jr. to play. I don't expect him to play again this regular season. I think that knee injury is a PCL sprain. It sounds like it's going to be 2 to 3 weeks. The goal is to get him back for the wild card round. So do not expect to see him back this week or against the Bengals after that. Ben Skowronek has that hip injury. Probably could play if it was a full week, short week. He's probably out. And Justin Fields is another week away too. So I think you're going to have Fields, Skowronek, and Porter out this week. And I think the other 4 have a really, really good chance of playing. Can never say definite for sure. You never know. But I really do think that all these guys have a really good shot to play. And Pickens seems to be really, really doing well. And all 4 of those guys I mentioned were, in team drills and actually working with the team, which shows that the team anticipates them being ready to play. So that's good news for the Steelers. They really need to get healthy.
Now, the other factor here is, other than the injuries and the recovery time, Cam Hayward was talking about the NFL messing with the product in terms of, this unlikely game on a Wednesday just because it's Christmas Day. And you had that physical game in Philly. Then you always have that physical game with the Ravens. And the Steelers' track record after playing the Ravens is not very good in terms of the next week, getting back licking their wounds and getting back into game day shape. And Hayward kind of alluded to that in some comments about the crazy schedule that they're on. How much of a concern is just the bounce back from a tough physical game with the Ravens coming, getting ready to play in a short week?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, all of this is hard. Usually there is a scenario where teams play 3 games in 11 days. Really when you go Sunday, Thursday, you were doing that. But it's not quite the same when you have full week, a full week before that start, another full week, and then a short week. Steelers have had 2 short weeks, going Sunday to Saturday to Wednesday. So it is really, really tight. And all of that kind of not only allows the physical tool to build up, but also when you're the Steelers and you have these problems that we've been talking about, it doesn't really give you a ton of time to go back into the lab and fix things. So you're kind of in a natural state. And as you mentioned, if you get hurt, you are probably out for most of that stretch, right? I mean, if we're talking about these 4 guys, Pickens, Elliott, Ogunjobi, and Jackson playing on Wednesday, does the extra day maybe allow them to suit up if it was Sunday game? I mean, potentially, you know what I mean? Like, all that builds up. And so it's really a big-time toll on their bodies. I understand why the NFL did it monetarily, financially, and everything, but I really don't think that the NFL needed Christmas games on a Wednesday Christmas. It just really throws off the schedule for all 4 of these teams. And I mean, it's not like the Steelers are the only one of these 4 teams that are banged up. Look at the Chiefs' injury report. Both starting tackles hurt. Chris Jones hurt. Obviously, Mahomes is playing through a high ankle sprain. They're banged up. The Ravens coming out of that Saturday game just have an absolute laundry list of injuries. And the Texans, obviously, Tank Dell and other guys get hurt for them. So all 4 of these teams really are banged up. Like, in that, I think with the 4 of them being playoff teams, all 4 of these teams have clinched playoff spots. I mean, that has potential ramifications for all 4 of these teams come the playoffs. And then if you're a team like Buffalo, I mean, you're probably feeling much better about it, right? Buffalo has 3 full weeks, maybe not as injured as these teams. And so all of it adds up because short weeks do tend to kind of put themselves with higher injury risk. And so, yeah, it's significant. The Steelers are going to have to take it easy this week as a result of that. But by taking it easy, you also don't get as much time to fix the ills that were there. And so there's downsides and upsides to this. But obviously, when you're talking about it from a player safety standpoint, 3 games in 11 days is just brutal.
Right. You mentioned the ills, and you had some interesting quotes from Arthur Smith, who was kind of patting himself on the back and saying, hey, he had some new wrinkles in that Ravens game. Clearly, Jaylen Warren had one of his most productive outings against the Ravens. And, the one benefit, or I don't know if you call it a benefit or a byproduct of the Pickens injury, has been the blossoming of Calvin Austin III, to the point where you made a great point that when you put Pickens back in the lineup, the emergence of Austin really adds something to the Steelers offense. Talk about what Arthur Smith did in the Ravens game, where he was liking some of the drives that the Steelers had. Obviously, those turnovers put a dagger in the heart of any momentum that the Steelers might have mustered. But yeah, talk about Austin's emergence, getting Pickens back, what Smith is doing, whether this means we're going to see more Warren for the future. Talk about what may be emerging as some positives for these Steelers.
Yeah, as you mentioned, they were moving the ball against the Ravens defense. And the Ravens, since the first Steelers game, when they made a few changes, they moved Kyle Hamilton to safety. Ardarius Washington came in. They've gotten a little healthier. They've been the best pass defense in football since that. Remember when we were talking about that first matchup, they were the worst in football? The Ravens are the best pass defense in football over the last 6 weeks. So that is significant. And the Steelers were running the football on the 4th best run defense in football this year. They were efficient. They averaged over 5 yards a carry. The issue is they got game scripted out of the run game. That was the biggest issue. They were constantly playing from behind, clawing back. And then after Russ's pick six, you just couldn't use the run game anymore, right? And so, I mean, let's think about it. The Steelers score, and when Russ fumbles, if the Steelers score and go 14-7, it's completely different. The Steelers are the team playing from the front. Not only are they playing from the front, they got the ball in the second half first. So they are playing from the front probably for the rest of the game there. And that's significant when you're in a shootout. And that's why the Ravens have never seen a shootout they don't like, because they feel like they can run the ball, they can ball control you, or they can hit explosives. So the Ravens are elite in shootouts, and they turn it into a track meet. Remember I said you can't let that turn into a track meet? Well, it turned into a track meet. And so I think the Steelers' offense has some positives. They were doing what they were doing really without George Pickens and without utilizing Pat Freiermuth barely at all. I mean, Freiermuth had 3 targets in this game, just not enough, which I think is a fault of Arthur Smith. But they also were able to move the ball. They did some different things, some gap runs that we had been talking about. They ran gap runs out of gun. Jaylen Warren, 12 carries for 48 yards. He had 2 carries that lost him 8 yards. On the other ones, I mean, he had 10 carries for almost 6 yards a pop. I mean, that's pretty good. Najee Harris, 9 carries for 42 yards. I mean, the Steelers' success rate this game in their rushing offense, 62%, the highest of the season. Their best rushing game statistically from an efficiency standpoint of the football season. That is something that we have been asking for, an efficient rushing offense. So I think there are interesting positives to this game. If they continue to lean into more of the power runs, if they continue to lean into some of the spread looks, I think their run game has a chance to actually launch a little bit, become an efficient group. Obviously, you can't turn the ball over, and that's become a big issue for the Steelers. Fairly quietly, John, they've turned the ball over in 10 of their last 12 games. Now, it hasn't cost them in some of those games, but they lost the turnover battle in this one. And then, obviously, against the Eagles, some of their turnovers really came back to bite them, too. Najee Harris's fumble, namely. It just has kind of sucked the wind out of the Steelers' sails. And their defense, we've talked about their defense, how banged up it is. How my belief is they are a really good defense. I don't think they're an elite defense, and that I think showed up again in this one where even though Russ fumbled the ball at the 4-yard line, right after that, the defense allows the Ravens to march 96 yards in 10 plays for a touchdown. So I do think we are seeing some of the things there. They're a better defense with Deshaun Elliott in, but they also are not a perfect defense. And so I just think there are some positives to the offense becoming a more efficient run team, a more of a ball control team. And we know the explosive passing game will come back with George Pickens. That has been a commonality all year. The explosive passing game has been there with George Pickens. And so then you get Calvin Austin, who's really emerged without George Pickens as a really, really dependable player. And, even with Skowronek out probably this week, I mean, we've talked about him. He's kind of emerged as this interesting chess piece that can make some tough grabs. And, Freiermuth before this game had scored touchdowns in 3 straight games. I just think there's some positives to the offense if Russ can calm down and they can take care of the football. I think the offense has had chances to move the ball, even if it hasn't been super pretty, and they've kind of shot themselves in the foot with some of these turnovers over the past few weeks.
Do we read anything into the fact that Warren outsnapped Harris to a significant degree and had more touches, I believe, too? I don't know the stats offhand, but I know you tweeted out those stats. The fact that Warren was getting the ball.
Yeah, Warren 40 snaps, Harris 17. Najee Harris has just 31 snaps over the last 2 weeks. And I think a lot of that is tied to the Steelers being down in those games. I think the Steelers, when they go no huddle, when they go pass heavy, Jaylen Warren's kind of the guy they go to. 1, for his pass pro. 2, he's their best receiving back. 3, he's an explosive lightning bolt. So I think game script's part of it. But, John, I will say, in 3 straight games, Najee Harris has been outsnapped by Jaylen Warren. That is a pattern, I think. It is becoming one. And so even early in the game, before they went down, before they went down big, right, when it was 17-7, 17-17, I mean, Jaylen Warren at halftime had outsnapped Najee Harris by 12 snaps. It still was significant enough to me to point it out. So I think there is a shift going towards Jaylen Warren here a little more. I don't think it's a huge shift. I don't think we're going to see 40-17 very often. I think a lot of that was late game, trying to throw the ball, trying to come back down 17 with 10 minutes left. But I do think, Jaylen Warren, before that against the Eagles, 7 more snaps. Against the Browns, 5 more snaps. That doesn't seem crazy to me. And so I do think there's something to it. And we've also seen Jaylen Warren kind of be an engine of the offense at times when he's out there, getting him the ball in space, doing different things there. But I don't expect the 40-17 usage that we saw against the Ravens to be the norm, unless the Steelers just trail every game. I suppose that's possible, but I do not expect it to be that extreme. But I do think I think Jaylen Warren now is finally healthy, and the Steelers are kind of starting to swing towards him a little more now.
Interesting stuff. And you touched on it a little bit, but in against Philadelphia, the defense, kept Saquon Barkley under control, but against the Ravens, the run defense just totally collapsed. Is there any explanation for that? And what are the fixes on defense, especially like you said, with Porter Jr. Likely out for the rest of the regular season?
Yeah, I really look at this entire thing. And, the defense, man, they don't really have a lot of wiggle room with some of this. I really do think, despite missing their secondary, the obsessive amount of miscommunication in December football is not good. And it's not just in the passing game. It's also in the run game. Look at how far out of their run fits they were in some of these. Like a simple motion across the formation got the Steelers out of their gaps all day in the run game. And Derrick Henry just attacks the same gap and goes, like, it is all on that. Patrick Queen, I don't know if you saw, John, just absolutely lit up the defense after the game. I think it was like 3 reporters there. I was one of them, where he just lit into the defense for playing superhero ball, not trusting each other. I thought Minka Fitzpatrick was a very big culprit of that specifically. Both coverage busts in the secondary for touchdowns, the likely touchdown, the interest touchdown, were on Minka. Also, the big run before his pick, he shoots the wrong guy. I mean, this is just Minka self-admitted those, by the way. A lot of those were on him. So, he was part of that, playing superhero ball. And obviously he got the pick to make up for some of that. But you can't do that. You have to trust your teammates. And sometimes you have to do your 1 of 11 instead of trying to be the superhero on every play. So I thought that was the run game issue. Some guys getting thrown off the ball at times, some linebackers with bad processing, the tackling in the last 2 weeks. That's a big concern. I mean, the Steelers, before the Eagles game, had missed 82 tackles all year. That was the best mark in the NFL. They had 82 missed tackles in 13 games, John. And then over the last 2 games, they have had 38 missed tackles, the most in the NFL in that span. They literally went from the best tackling team through 13 weeks to the worst tackling team in the NFL over the last 2 weeks. That is a tough one. Part of it is matchup when you're facing Saquon, when you're facing those elusive Eagles players. Some of it is Derrick Henry. I get it, but you got to be better than how they were. And so Deshaun Elliott coming back will help that. But it's not going to fix everything. They have to be more sound. They have to have the communication on point. You cannot have coverage busts. You cannot have coverage busts in December. We talked about this in October and thought it was fixed, right? Remember against Indianapolis and Dallas, how they were having coverage bust after coverage bust, and everyone was like, what's going on? Well, it was gone, and all of a sudden now it's back. Like, you cannot have coverage bust in December. And so, really, John, it's nothing like super in-depth. The guys just have to play more in sync. They have to play more as a unit. You have to communicate. You have to play your 1 of 11. And those are the big 2 things that they have to do. Now, there's other concerns. I think the secondary talent without Joey Porter Jr., and I think Pierre and Trice both had rough games. There's no doubt about that. So I do think the secondary talent with how limited they were didn't help matters. but I also think that they could have just done the simple things, the details, and I don't think they did those well. And that's obviously why I think you see the Eagles and the Ravens be able to do what they were able to do. The run game stuff was odd, though. That was the first time all year they have really been just dominated up front like that.
You make some great points in, December football, that term, December football. Tomlin once said the Steelers are going to unleash hell in December, but I'll tell you, Decembers have been hell for Steelers fans, and I've heard since the Ravens game the C word out there, and I'm not talking Christmas, I'm talking collapse, and everybody's thinking, here we go again, another down the stretch flop by the Steelers. But you rightly point out that everything is still there for the Steelers. They win the next 2 games, they win the division, and they get a home playoff game, which is really important. With Minka, because the role he's been playing in the defense has been kind of hasn't really put him in the splash play, equation. And fans in Pittsburgh were pointing this out and being critical of Minka. Is there any chance that Minka hears some of that criticism and was trying to play superhero against the Ravens? I mean, because he did, he did force the issue and flub up. I mean, there's no doubt about it on those plays that you ticked down. I mean, those were flubs.
Yeah, I do think that was part of it. I think Minka feels the pressure of having to make a play, and feels like he should be making more plays. And especially with the limited talent in the secondary, once Joey went out, I think he felt the pressure that something needs to happen. We can't really stop the run. I need to make, whether it was a TFL, I need to make a big-time pick. He did end up making that big-time pick, of course, but I think he felt the pressure to make a play because of how, 1, injured they were, and 2, just kind of, he was the guy in the secondary at that point, right? I mean, they were missing 3 out of their 5 starters, and that's significant. And in base, they were missing 3 of their 4, and he was the only guy left. He was playing a position that he hasn't played much this year, right? He played strong. He played free for most of the year. He was strong in this one, so he felt like, I have to make a big play. And so I think he was hunting that. But I think sometimes when you hunt the big play, it can go to negativity as well. And I think you kind of saw that. Like on the likely touchdown, the Ravens have run that play so many times, and it has been basically a swing screen to Henry. And so I understand Minka was kind of sitting on it, hoping they would throw it so he can pick it, right? The second one, he's trying to jump an out route to Zay Flowers and trying to make a play on that, but instead he accidentally leaves Mark Andrews wide open. So I just think, you think about stuff like that. And he wasn't the only one. There were a few times Cam Hayward up front tries to read Henry and dodges the gap and leaves the other gap open. Patrick Queen himself admitted he did it a few times. I thought there was pressure from the Steelers' stars. I thought Hayward, I think Minka, I think Queen, those 3 specifically were trying to make big-time plays. And I think sometimes it was to the detriment of the defense. Because I also want to say, I think everybody knew T.J. Watt wasn't T.J. Watt. You kind of saw it throughout the game, where that ankle was a detriment to him. And so I do think that was something that popped up. But I do think when you look at the Steelers' defense, they just need to be going back to the fundamentals. The Stars, while they tried to make splash plays, sometimes hunting that splash play isn't always, the right move. Sometimes you just got to live to fight another day.
Great point, and I think it was a great message sent by Patrick Queen, reminding the Stars, that not to maybe force the issue and get back to those fundamentals. So let's hope that is what we see, a more cohesive, communicative defense working in cooperation, all 11 guys against the Chiefs. Speaking of those Chiefs, you were talking about the injuries. Patrick Mahomes hasn't been the superstar with the gaudy stats all year. They've been squeaking by in a lot of games, getting a lot of favorable calls from refs, getting Lady Luck pretty much with them on every turn. How is this matchup on a short week, banged up, shaping up? I mean, are we looking at a shootout? Are we looking at kind of a sloppy game, low scoring? I mean, what's your feel of how this thing is going to unfold on Christmas Day?
Yeah, I do think that there was some type of roughness to the Chiefs, but I do think over the last few weeks they've started to heat up a little bit. I think they're a little more efficient offensively. I think Mahomes is getting into his January form, right, where he looks like the best quarterback in the world. It never fails, right? Mahomes really hasn't won MVP in a while. Josh Allen, Lamar, all those guys look like the best quarterback in football. And then in January and February, here comes Mahomes, and he reminds you why he's Patrick Mahomes, why they're two-time defending Super Bowl champs. He's starting to round into that form. And so I do think that the Steelers have to be aware of that. Not only that, this is a healthier offense than they were a little bit ago. Now, losing both tackles in back-to-back games that's not great. They have Joe Tooney playing at left tackle. He's a guard playing out at tackle. And then at right tackle, we'll see if they have Jawan Taylor, who has a knee injury. They have Wanye Morris, who was their starting left tackle that they benched. So, TJ Watt, hello, that's a juicy matchup. I think regardless of if, Taylor's playing on an injured knee or Wanye Morris is the guy. But Hollywood Brown's back, so their wide receiving core is much better than it was. Rashee Rice, obviously losing him for the season was a blow to them. But now they kind of have a healthier group. Juju Smith-Schuster missed a lot of time. He's back. Xavier Worthy had an ankle injury. He's getting healthier. So you now have, DeAndre Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster, Xavier Worthy, and Hollywood Brown, which is a nice group of four guys. Plus, of course, Travis Kelce, who maybe isn't what he used to be. He's not, the all-time detonator of defenses, but still a very, very solid player. Still has this just absurd feel with Mahomes. They are like connected with each other. And then Pacheco's back as well in the backfield. So, this one could be a shootout, John, just because the Steelers secondary, even with Deshaun back, Joey Porter Jr. being out really presents tough matchups. Because I think you're going to have Dante Jackson on Brown and Worthy. I think you kind of have to because they're the faster, smaller guys, and you don't really want Pierre or Trice on them. But do you really want James Pierre or Corey Trice on DeAndre Hopkins? I think that's going to be a tough matchup. The big physical receiver. And then Kelsey's going to do what Kelsey does every now and then. But I don't think this is necessarily going to be a shootout. The reason I say that is the Chiefs this year have kind of transformed themselves. They used to be a really explosive offense that could put up 50 any day. They are not that right now. What they are is a ball control offense. And that's something we really haven't seen. You want to know why they win all of their close games? It's because they're a great ball control offense. It's not mystifying. Sometimes, yes, they, a guy misses a kick, they have something happen, they get a turnover, but they have become the masters of ball control. And that has really allowed them to be a great close game team. It's kind of just similar to how Mike Tomlin's Kenny Pickett teams won games, except they're more talented, right?
Right.
They won games through making a splash play on defense, running the ball, trying to play ball control. It's kind of what the Steelers want to do this year. But the Chiefs have mastered this in a lot of ways. They are really effective in ball control. So here's some stats just to kind of illustrate that for you. In plays per drive, they have 7 plays per drive. That's first in the NFL. They're first in the NFL in first downs gained. They're 7th in the NFL in scoring drive percentage. They score on 45% of their drives. They're 7th in negative plays, so they don't get a lot of negative plays. More importantly, they are 32nd in drives per game. No one has less drives per game than the Kansas City Chiefs, and they are 2nd in time of possession. So what they do is they just don't let you get the football. They take long, syncopated drives, and that's how they do it. Very slow, long ones. It also helps they are 2nd in the NFL in third down conversion percentage. So when third down comes up, Mahomes turns on the magic for play, first down, and they keep it going. They make their kicks. and they score. That's how they do it. So they might only have 6 drives in the game, but there have been times this year where they score all 6 drives. So that is significant when you look at that. They don't punt the ball very often. And so that is what this team is. So shootout, probably not. The reason being, they are a ball control offense. They try to win time possession, and they try to keep everything limited because they feel like they can win because they have the best quarterback in football, they think. And so that is all the reason why this team is so good at winning close games. And that's why they're 14-1. It's not sexy. It's not the overall kind of, wow, explosive play after explosive play. They've transformed themselves into a different form, and they've kind of had to, because you look at the underlying metrics defensively over the past 8 weeks. They've had some cornerback injuries over the last few weeks, and they're banged up a little bit on defense. With Chris Jones out, they're going to be even more banged up. But there have been some concerning trends defensively. So what I'm trying to say is if the Steelers' defense can actually thwart some of this Chiefs offense and not let them ball control all game, the offense can kind of sustain drives a little bit, score. The Steelers have a chance in this one because the Chiefs play ball control. They don't play explosive.
I love that analysis of the offense, and the third downs are going to be the money downs in this game. There's no doubt about it. And of course, conducting everything is Andy Reid, who's a master play caller. So he's like conducting the Boston Pops on these long, drawn-out, ball-controlled drives. They're going to try to deprive the Steelers of a Christmas Day present of a win. And if they do, where does that leave the Steelers vis-a-vis the division and the playoffs? Does that make because the Ravens, I think, have some. Well, they have the Texans in Houston, and then they have Cleveland in Baltimore. So and we have the Bengals at Acrisure after a mini bye after this Wednesday Christmas game. So give us the scenarios for the division, and if we lose against the Chiefs, is that last game against the Bengals meaningless? In other words, the Steelers would be a wild card, or how does this fall out?
Yeah, so let's walk through this. So if the Steelers and Ravens win out, Steelers win the division. They'll have the tiebreakers by common opponent. They will have the tiebreaker. So they will have equal head-to-head, 1-1, and they will also have the same divisional record. And so by common opponents, because the Raiders beat the Ravens and the Steelers beat the Raiders, that will give the Steelers the division if they are both 12-5. If both these teams go 1-1, different things happen. Obviously, if the Ravens win out, the Steelers lose. The Ravens win the division outright. But if the Steelers beat the Chiefs but lose to the Cincinnati Bengals, but the Ravens beat the Browns, it doesn't matter if the Ravens beat Texans or not. Even if the Steelers beat the Chiefs and lose to the Bengals, but the Ravens beat the Browns, the Ravens will win the division by divisional record. So the Steelers have to win Cincinnati. That is a huge game. If the Steelers lose to Kansas City, the Ravens lose to Houston, and they both win in Week 18, beating the Browns and the Bengals respectively, Steelers win. So that's kind of your scenario. So really, if the Steelers lose to the Chiefs and the Ravens lose to the Texans, yes, these games this week can be meaningless. But if the Steelers might have to win out. If the Steelers win out, they win the division. So the Steelers control their destiny. If they win out, win the last 2 games, you are the 3 seed, and you are right there with them. So I think the Steelers have a lot to play for. The scenarios aren't hard to kind of digest. But I will say this, just because the Steelers win this week doesn't mean that they win the division. The division cannot be decided until Week 18. And no matter what, whether the Steelers win this week or lose this week, they have to beat the Bengals to win the division. So that is a significant piece of all this. Now, if they both lose both games, like the Ravens lose both games, the Steelers lose both games, the Steelers will win the division as well. So lose both, Steelers win both, Steelers win, and then in any other scenario where it's 1-1, the Steelers have to win that Bengals game, unless the Ravens lose to the Browns, of course. So the opposite is true, right? The Ravens can beat Houston, the Steelers can lose to KC, but if the Ravens lose to Cleveland, the Steelers beat the Bengals, the Steelers win the division. So that Bengals game is basically a must-win if you are the Steelers. But there are more scenarios right now for the Steelers to win the division than there are for the Ravens.
Well, it's all about those divisional games. That's why the NFL likes to put them toward the back of the schedule, so they're going to count the following week as well. But here we are, Steelers fans, hours away from Christmas Eve. We'll probably get word about George Pickens, tomorrow, or do you think they're going to make it a game time decision?
Yeah, we'll find out tomorrow, but practice report just dropped. Pickens, Elliott, Jackson, Ogunjobi, all full participants.
Okay.
Usually, that is going to mean full practice today, probably a full practice tomorrow, John. Basically, every time you get 2 FPs in a row, they will be off the injury report without a game status. So my guess is we are going to see all of those guys without an injury status as long as nothing pops up.
That is an early Christmas present for you Steeler fans. And of course, the big present would be a Steelers win on Christmas Day. We'll be covering it all on another early edition of the podcast next Monday afternoon as well, ahead of New Year's Eve. So be there for that. But all eyes on Acrisure Christmas Day. You open up your Christmas presents, and then you wait for the big present of a hopeful Steelers win against the defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs. We'll see you there, and go Steelers.